Let's begin today with discuss our learning. Should be kind of see a situation. We're going to start today Tes Vav Amar Aleph. Bechinam Rav Nachman Amar Rabba Baravua. It must be 5, 10. It's about 13, 14 lines from the bottom. The line starts Rabbi Lezer Rabbi Shua Mina. Okay, we're in the middle of Rabbi Chanina's Kanakayanim, and we're discussing truma that's tamei, burning it together with other truma that's tamei. And one is tamei less, has a lower level of tuma, and when you burn, because both of them need to be burnt, you're allowed to burn them together. And even though you're meisif tamal tumas, even though you're adding, while you're destroying it, you're adding tuma. Based on that, came along Reb Meir, and Reb Meir told us, you're allowed to add tuma when you're destroying it, so you're also allowed to burn truma tahira together with truma tamei on Erev Pesach. He gave a bunch of suggestions of what Reb Meir meant based on that. We started off saying, based on the words of Rabbi Chanina's Kanakainim, we said, well, can't say that. Rabbi Chanina's Kanakainim is talking about truma tamei or basar tamei with other basar tamei, and here you're talking about truma tahira. Okay, so we tried. Let's say it's Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says it's also tamei and pasal together. One of them is tamei, one's pasal. Here it's tahar. You can't say that. So we offered a suggestion that really is following Rabbi Chanina's Kanakainim. And Rabbi Chanina's Kanakainim doesn't hold that it's the second basar is tamei min atayra. He holds that it's really only tamei midirabanan. So really midiraisa, I'm burning tahar. It's tahar midiraisa. Together with tamei, Reb Meir can take from that on Erev Pesach I can burn tahar with tamei. That was suggestion number 3. Then we went to Reish Lakish that says that we're actually learning from Rabbi Yeshua. We're not learning from Rabbi Chanina's Kanakayim or Rabbi Akiva. We're learning from Rabbi Yeshua. So, what did Rabbi Yeshua say? Rabbi Yeshua said that a barrel of truma that has a suffix, if it's tamei, Rabbi Yeshua says you're allowed to let it get destroyed by leaving it uncovered and all of that. So we said you can't prove from that you're allowed to mamish, put it together, tamei and tahar. Over here, you're right. It may be tamei, it may be tar, and you're allowed to destroy it. So you're right, it may be tar, but it doesn't say that you're actually destroying it. It says you can let it be exposed. But here, your mamish doing it biyadayim. So there's no proof from there, from that Rabbi Yeshua to what Rabbi Meir is saying. So we offered another statement of Rabbi Yeshua, and that's where we ended up. Yesterday, we said that if you have a barrel of truma that breaks and it's falling into the lower area, a barrel of wine that breaks, it's dripping into the lower area of tamei chulin. So came along Rabbi Yeshua, it was machlekes Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yeshua said that you're not allowed to be. Rabbi Lezer said that you're not allowed to be metame biyadayim. You can't use a tamei keli to collect the truma from falling into the chulin that's tamei. And Rabbi Yeshua said you are allowed to. You can be metame biyad. Why? Because it's about to be entirely lost anyway. It's on its way down. Once the truma falls into the tamei chulin, it's going to be destroyed. So what's the difference if a second before I catch it in a tamei? What am I gaining by catching it? I'm saving the chulin beneath from becoming truma, which will be totally forbidden now because that chulin is tamei. And if the truma falls into it, then I lose the truma and I lose the chulin. So I catch the truma before it falls in. I salvage the chulin. So we can learn from that you're allowed to be metame something that's about to be destroyed anyway. Very good. Okay. I'm allowed to burn chametz. I'm allowed to be metame the chametz when it's about to be burnt. So the Gemara asks, so then why are you saying that you learn from Rabbi Yeshua? Why are you saying you learn midvarav? It should be midvarai. From his words, it's only Rabbi Yeshua. It's not Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Lezer. So he said, no, we learn from the machlekes of Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Lezer. And whenever there's a machlekes in Taras, Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Lezer, you pass like Rabbi Yeshua. That's where we're starting. Masnisin ba'ava tumah deraisa, vlada tumah deraisa. Our mission is talking about that both of them are deraisa. My midivrayim. In other words, Rabbi Chanina Skanakainim was not talking about a deraisa and derabanan like we offered to Rutzim before. So then what's he learning from? What's Rabbi Meir saying that from their words? My midivrayim, so what are their words? Midivra Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yeshua. Exactly the way we were suggesting here in the answer of Rish Lakish. Okay. Esvei Rabbah of Nachman. Now, who said this statement before? It was really Rish Lakish said it, but we said B'chein Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rabba Baravua. Rava was a student of Rav Nachman, as well as Rav Chisda and others, Rabba, but he's a student of Rav Nachman. He asked Rav Nachman the following. Amar Rabbi Yosi. Rabbi Yosi responded to Rav Meir. Rav Meir's learning that you're allowed to burn on Erev Pesach in the 6th hour, you're allowed to burn truma that's tahar together with truma that's tameh in the 6th hour. Rabbi Yosi said no. Eina nidin dam l'raya. Rabbi Yosi says you can't compare the two. Shekshida Rabbi Seinu, when our sages testified, al mahidu, what were they testifying about? Im al basar shenitma bevlada tumma shesarfen asem basar shenitma ba'avatuma v'zetami v'zetami. If you're telling me, if it was about basar shenitma bevlada tumma, that means it's really blood probably. It's basar that became tameh with a shlishi, that became tameh with a sheni, which is now a shlishi. And now you're burning it with an av, so it's with something that became tummy from an av, which is a rishon. So you're making a shlishi into a sheni, the way we explained before. So they're both tummy. So you don't have a proof. Is that possible? Is that tummy? If you're going to say that it's Rabbi Akiva's view, that you're going to use Rabbi Akiva's view as a support, he's telling Rabbi Meir. That was oil, that was truma, that was puzzle, it was a shlishi. And you're going to burn it together with, you're going to burn it, you're going to light it in a lamp that's a rishon, so you turn it into a sheni. I'll agree with you if you're burning truma that's tameh on one level with truma that's tameh on a different level. But how can you burn truma that's tuluya? Truma that's tluya means it's a doubt. Is it tamei? Is it tar? Together with truma that's tameya, maybe Eliyahu Navi is going to come and say that the whole thing was a mistake. It was never tamei. So, what's happening here is that we're noticing that Rabbi Yosi understands that Rabbi Meir's background, that Rabbi Meir's support is not Rabbi Yeshua. It's Rabbi Chanina Skanakainim and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yosi is responding to Rabbi Meir. He's telling him, what are you telling me that Rabbi Chanina is your support? That's tummy and tummy. What are you telling me that Rabbi Akiva is your support? That's puzzle and tummy. But what the case that you're giving me has nothing to do with that. And now it goes on. It goes on. The following part of the Bryce is not necessary for the argument or for the proof of what we need the Bryce for. It just happens to be the end of the Bryce, so we finish it off. It says like this. A pigel v'anaysev. Pigel that's carbon that became puzzled because the thoughts were to sprinkle the blood in the wrong time. Nicer, the meat that was left over, and meat that became tummy. So all of those things need to be burnt. Beishami says you can't burn them together. Why? Because they're not tummy. When you burn them together, you're making them all tummy. Because there's one piece of meat in it, it's tummy. Beisil says you can burn them together. Why? He says that they have a status of tumah midirabanan on all of them. There's tummy midiraisa. Pigel and Nicer have a status midirabanan of being tummy as well, as we'll see later. So Beisil says, look, it's tummy midirabanan, tummy midiraisa. It's anyways tummy. You're allowed to burn them together. Let's go back to the reason why we brought this brisa. If Reb Meir's support was really Rabbi Yeshua, that said, You're allowed to be metame truma that's dripping down into the lower gas, into the lower pit. Why? It's in order to salvage the chulin. So why is Reb Yossi telling Reb Meir that Reb Chanina's Ganakainim doesn't support you, Rabbi Yakiva doesn't support you? Why is he telling him that? Reb Meir was never discussing that. He was discussing Rabbi Yeshua. Midivreya means midvarav, in the words of Rabbi Yeshua. He's responding, and it has nothing to do with what the Reb Meir was saying. It goes like this. So why is Rabbi Yossi telling him that Rabbi Chanina b'skanakainim is not a support? Amalei Rav Nachman says to Rava that's asking the question, Rabbi Yossi lava daite. Rabbi Yossi didn't get it. He thought Reb Meir was saying from Reb Chanina's Ganakainim Amalei, and Reb Meir responds, I wasn't even talking about that. You're giving me a whole speech, but that wasn't what I was talking about. I was talking about Rabbi Yeshua, and that Rabbi Yeshua was a support. And now Rabbi Yossi responds to Reb Meir, then that's what the end of the Mishnah says. You go back and you look at the Mishnah. It says, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yeshua. It goes on to discuss Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yeshua. In other words, the first conversation was what Rabbi Yossi mistakenly thought Rabbi Meir was referring to. Rabbi Meir says, I'm not talking about that, I'm talking about Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yossi responds, well, Rabbi Yeshua doesn't help you either. The Maida Rabbi Lezer Rabbi Yeshua shasay v'zu b'fnei atzma. They agree. Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yeshua holds that if it's a doubt, if it's tamei, tluya v'ala tmeya, if one is definitely tamei and one is possibly tamei, you can't burn them together because it could come out that I'm sorry. If it's tluya v'ala tmeya, that's the machlekes. So what does that tell me? That Rabbi Yeshua will hold that if it's really tahar, if it's 100% tahar, then you definitely can't burn it. It's only if it's possibly tamei that you could burn it together. And here you're taking something that's definitely tahar, Reb Meir is saying, and you're burning it together with something that's tamei. Rabbi Yossi says that that's no proof from Rabbi Yeshua. Okay, now we ask. Well, back to the pigul nicer and tummy, we'll see shortly. But pigul nicer and tummy is tummy midirabanan. Tummy is tummy midiraisa. Pigul and nicer is tummy midirabanan. It's treated as tummy. Very good. Now the Gemara asks, "V'may enehi amida." What did Rabbi Yossi mean when he says that you can't learn from Rabbi Yeshua? He says, Midah, it's a good support. Rabbi Yeshua says that you're allowed to be metame when the wine barrel broke. You're allowed to be metame before it becomes tamei. Why? Because it's about to be lost. So here also, I have chametz on Erev Pesach. They're both truma. One is tamei and one is tahar. They're both about to be lost. According to Rabbi Yeshua, I should be allowed to be metame them, just like I'm allowed to be metame the wine. Then they're about to be lost. It's considered like it's destroyed already. It's about to be lost. He says, so Rabbi Meir has a good support. Why is Rabbi Yossi saying it's not a good support? The Gemara in Shani Hasam, the Kehefset Chulin. Over there, you have a reason to burn, not to burn. You have a reason to catch the truma from falling, because if it falls, you lose your chulin. Over here, what's the reason? Burn it separately. What are you making a big deal? Burn it separately. You gain nothing by burning it together. What are you telling me? I gain nothing by burning it together. Of course I gain something. I don't need an extra fire. You're telling me hefset chulin, that I'm going to lose the wine that's beneath it. So here you're going to lose the wood. It's a good kasha, Rabbi Yirmiyah's kasha. Hefsin Meruba. It wasn't Rashi wine. It was some other wine. So it's a Hefsin Meruba. But for the wood, that's a Hefsin Meruba. What did Daniel tell us once? The Saba is Eliyahu Navi. Quoted a thesis from somewhere. Okay. Now we start a new discussion here. We don't drop everything that we learned, so you have to keep that in mind. But it starts like a new. Amar Rabasi, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Machlekes B'Sheish. Rabbi Yechanan says, Rabasi says the name of Rabbi Yechanan, that the Machlekes between Reb Meir and Rabbi Yossi, if you're allowed to burn truma that's tamei, together with truma that's tar on Erev Pesach, is only in the 6th hour. But what was the 6th hour? The 6th hour was in between 11 and 12 in the morning, right? But once it becomes 12 o'clock, Abul B'Sheva, with Mamash Aser, Midairaisa, half the day has passed, right? That's the time already for the Shechita of the Korban Pesach. You're not allowed to have Chametz Midairaisa. So Divrei Kol Sarfin. Even Rabbi Yossi would agree that you can burn them both together. It's a bit of a chiddush, because what are you gaining over there? But the fact that it's Aser, that's Aser Midairaisa. Rabbi Yossi was only arguing with Reb Meir when it was only Aser Midirabanan. It's a statement of Rabbi Yechanan. Amalei Reb Zera l'Rabasi. Rabasi was the one that said this over. Reb Zera says to Rabasi, must be after Reb Zera went to Eretz Yisrael. Right? He traveled. He went from Babel to Eretz Yisrael. Over there he sees Rabasi, I assume. It says, Nema kasav Rabbi Yechanan maslisin b'ava tumah deraisa, v'lada tumah derabanan, umay midivrayim, midivrei Rabbi Chanias Kanakainim. Rabbi Yechanan is saying this, that the whole machlekes between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi is only when it's the Zman Isser of Chametz Midirabanan. Then maybe the support for Rabbi Meir was really Rabbi Chanias Kanakainim. And Rabbi Chanias Kanakainim said, I'm allowed to burn basar that's a shlishi, together with basar that's a rishon. And it becomes a sheni. The problem is over there, they're both tamei, and Reb Meir is talking about one star. So maybe the pshat is that Reb Chanias Kanakainim is really referring to basar that became tamei, the shlishi. What's that shlishi? It was really only tamei midirabanan. And that's Reb Meir's support from Reb Chanias Kanakainim. Well, if it's tamei midirabanan, then this man yisr midirabanan would be the same status. But if it would be Tamei in the 6th hour at 11 o'clock, but if it would be Tamei Midairaisa, then even Rabbi Yossi would agree. So therefore, Rabbi Chanias Kanakainim was referring to the bigger chiddush than what he thought. Rabbi Chanias Kanakainim is referring to that I'm allowed to burn meat that's only Tamei Midirabanan at a very low level of Tumah, together with Basa that's Tamei Midiraisa at a much higher level of Tumah. And I'm allowed to burn them together. I'm allowed to add on a tumah derabanan, a tumah deraisa. So therefore, I'm allowed to burn at a zman iser miderabanan as well. Amrlei, Rabasi responds to Reb Zera in, you're right. He's Reb Meir, according to the way Reb Yechanan is learning. According to the way Reb Yechanan is learning, Reb Meir, good morning. Reb Meir's taka learning from Rabbi Chanias Kanakainim, who's allowing Tumah Midirabanan to be burnt together with Tumah Deraisa. Itmanami. We have this actually, the way Rabasi responded to Reb Zera, we have this actually as a clear statement. Amar Rabbi Yechanan, that the way Rabbi Yechanan understood the machlekes, Reb Meir and Reb Yossi is maslisin b'ava Tumah Deraisa. Our Mishnah is talking about that when the basar became tamei from an avatama, which becomes now a rishon, that was talking about that was a deraisa. Vlada tama derabanan. When it became tamei with the vlada tama, which we said is a vlad, is which when it came tamei from a sheni, that was only a derabanan. Amay midivrayim. What does it mean midivrayim from their words? Midivra Rabbi Chanias Kanakainim. from the words of Rabbi Chanina's Kanakainim. So we're going back to an earlier answer that we gave. What's the source of Reb Meir? We switched like 4 or 5 times. What's the source of Reb Meir? In the end, we had Rish Lakish that said the source of Reb Meir is Reb Yeshua. And then we had a statement from Reb Nachman, the source of Reb Meir is Reb Yeshua. Now we're going back, according to Rabbi Yochanan, the source of Reb Meir is really Rabbi Chanina's Kanakainim. And this was answer number 3. And the machlekes is, and the machlekes is only by the 3rd hour, and Rabbi Chanina's Kanakainim is holding that it's the Rabbanon, that it's Basar that was Tamei Midei Rabbanon is being burnt together with Basar that's Tamei Midei Raisa at a much higher level of Tamei. The machlekes b'sheishav b'sheva divrei kol safrim, but everyone would agree that in the 7th hour you're always allowed to burn tahar truma together with tamei truma. Lema Messiah, let's bring a support for Rabbi Yochanan. Hapigel v'aneiser v'tamei. We mentioned this on top of the Amud. Pigel. That means a carbon that became possible because machshavas chutz l'zmani, he had the wrong thought. The kain had the wrong thoughts. V'aneiser is leftover meat over the time period that you're allowed to eat it. V'tamei. Bishami say you can't burn them together because you're not allowed to add tumah onto those items. Beis Hillel says that you're allowed to burn them together. But what do we see? What do we see? That the fact that they're asur midai raisa, even though they're not all tamei, the fact that they're asur midai raisa tells me that I'm allowed to already ignore the tumah and burn them all together. You see, this is really a very good source. There's no tumah here on them at all. Well, that's what we'll learn. At least on the daraisa level, there's no tumah. And I'm allowed to burn them together. Why? Because there's an isser midai raisa. That's a great source for Rabbi Yochanan, that when there's an isser daraisa, I'm allowed to burn. Even Rabbi Yossi would agree that I'm allowed to burn tahar truma together with tamei truma. Gemara says Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi were talking about truma. The Gemara says shani hasim dislo tumah midei. You can't prove from there. It's not a proof because over there it's not mamish tahar. Pigel and Naisar are not really tahar. They have a tumah derabanan on them, so it's not a real proof. Itnan a pigel v'Naisar mitam yasiyadayim. If you touch pigel and Naisar, it makes your hands tamei. No, midarabanan. So don't prove that the reason why you're allowed to burn it together is because there's no tumah at all, but because there's an isser deraisa, you're allowed to burn it together because there really is a tumah on it. It's a tumah midarabanan. Okay. Now the Gemara says, let's bring another support for Rabbi Yochanan. Apasha ifsha b'nifsala milechol la'adam v'akelav yachal achla. What happens is food could be makabel tumah, but it has to become food. Once it's food, then in order for it not to be makabel tumah, it has to become very not food. So if it's nifsal milechol adam, it's not edible anymore for a human, but it's still edible for a dog. So it has a status of food and it never lost it. It needs to get worse to lose its status. So what happens? It could still become tamei tumasaychlim. That means that it gives off tumah or it gets tamei. It gives off tumah or it gets tamei b'kabeya. For sure, if it's the size of a kabeya, it will give as well. B'nisrefes imatmeya b'pesach. Wow, you can burn it together with tamei on Pesach. Who holds this? Who are we referring to? Reb Meir. Let's say this is truma. Are we referring to Reb Meir or Reb Yossi? It must be referring to Reb Yossi. If it's Reb Meir, I don't need a pasha ifsha. I'm allowed to burn everything on Pesach. I'm allowed to burn everything together. It must be the fact that it's pasha ifsha, that it's ruined bread that's being spoiled, that it's the opinion of Rabbi Yossi that holds usually I'm not allowed to. So, but nevertheless, here I am allowed to. Why? Because it's not edible. It's not edible for humans. Not edible for humans. That's a proof that I'm allowed to be metamid. So very good. So also, if it's aser, I should be allowed to be metamit, which is a support for Rabbi Yochanan that says in the 7th hour you're allowed to be metamit. It says Shani Asam Dafer Balmo. Over there it's different. Over there it's taka considered like dirt. Let's see what Rashi says over here. Let's see what he says. Once it reached that level, once it reached the level that it's not edible for humans, that's really not a support for something else that is edible. Other things are edible, it's just asr. Okay, now the Gemara jumps back to Ihachi. Going back, if you're correct, Reb Zera, the way Rabbi Yochanan is getting the support, that Rabbi Yochanan is learning from Rabbi Chanina Skanakayim and we're dealing with the Tumah Midarabanan, that's together with the Tumah Deraisa. If that's what we're learning from Rabbi Yochanan, my Maida, why does Rabbi Yossi go on and say, Maida Rabbi Lezer Rabbi Yeshua? Who's mentioned Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yeshua? We had other answers that Rabbi Meir's support was Rabbi Yeshua. But if we're learning from, if Rabbi Meir is really learning from Rabbi Chanina Skanakayim, why is Rabbi Yossi bringing in Rabbi Lezer Rabbi Yeshua? So the Gemara says, Achi Kamar, Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Meir. This is what Rabbi Yossi is saying, Rabbi Meir. Afilu Rabbi Yeshua de Mekel. I know you weren't talking about Rabbi Yeshua. You were talking about Rabbi Chanina Skanakayim. But even Rabbi Yeshua, that does have leniencies when it comes to mixing truma that's tar with tamei. Ki mekel betluyu tmeya. He was only mekel when one thing was a suffix tamei together with something that's definitely tamei. It's never mekel with tar and tamei. Aval b'tayro tmeya loy, but not with tar and tamei. Okay, now we go back. We say, so midu midi. What is Rabbi Yossi saying to Rabbi Meir? It's not a good support. Rabbi Chanina, if he's learning from Rabbi Chanina Skanakayim, and it's only for the 6th hour, and Rabbi Chanina Skanakayim was actually referring to tamei meat that was tamei midirabanan, and I'm allowed to mix it with meat that's tamei midiraisa to burn it. So that's Rabbi Meir has a very good support. So Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, hacha bebasar shnit mashkin shnit machmasher tzvazir Rabbi Meir letamei v'Rabbi Yossi letamei. We're about to enter into a very interesting sugya regarding if mashkin is metame, if liquids become tamei midiraisa or midirabanan or not at all. This is like a background. We've already discussed these things on different levels, but this is like the background to all of them. So what Rabbi Yirmiyah says over here is that the basis of this conversation of Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yossi is really based on a machlekes if mashkin becomes tamei midiraisa or not. Rabbi Yossi holds that the case of Rabbi Chanina Skanakayim is they're agreeing to the case. The question is, the facts are the facts. The question is, how do you interpret the facts? So what happened? We had a sheretz. The sheretz is considered an avatuma. The sheretz touched the keli. The keli is the rishon. The keli touches mashkin. Now, mashkin now become a sheni. Touch the rishon, keli become a sheni. Now, does it become a sheni? That we're going to see. It's a machlekes. It's a machlekes if it really becomes tamei midiraisa or only midirabanan. The mashkin now touch basar. The mashkin now touch basar. The basar is now tamei as a shlishi. It's a machlekes. Tamei as a shlishi midiraisa midirabanan. So if it's tamei midiraisa, then the fact that Rabbi Chanina Skanakayim says, "Oh, you can take that basar that's tamei midiraisa and burn it with other basar that's tamei midiraisa," there's no support for Rabbi Meir. That says that at a zman iser midirabanan I can burn something that's tahar with tamei. That's no support because this is both tamei midiraisa. But according to Reb Meir, that learns it differently, he says that the mashkin were never tamei midiraisa, so therefore the meat was never tamei midiraisa. And now you're allowed to burn it together with something that was tamei midiraisa. So that's a support, and that's the basis of the conversation. That's what Rabbi Yirmiyah says. Let's read Rabbi Yirmiyah again. The meat became tamei with the mashkin. That became tamei because of a sheret. I added in that there's a keli there based on this nice long Rashi on the bottom. And each of them followed their opinions. That tumas mashkin, in order to be metama other things, is only tamei midirabanan. So therefore, the meat is only tamei midirabanan. And the fact that you're allowed to move it together, put it together to burn, means is a support that I can burn chametz and erev Pesach and uzman yisr midirabanan. The whole case was dealing with the deraisa, and there's no support for sheish shoyis to be able to burn chametz tahar with tamei. The Tanya is taught in a brisa. We're on top of Tezayin. Suffik mashkin li tamei. If liquid, it's a suffix if it became tamei. That's original. It's original tuma. Did the mashkin become tamei? In other words, did a tamei person or did a sheretz? If it happened, there was someone tamei here. It's a question if he touched the mashkin. So tamei. Safek deraisa l'chumra. We don't know. We'll see who holds this. However, l'tamei acherim, but if it's a suffix, if it touched something else. Okay. The suffix is not if it's tamei. The suffix is if this liquid touched something else. So then that's tahar d'ivri Reb Meir. So mashkin becomes tamei, but it can't be metame anything else midiraisa. So therefore, if it's a suffix, if it touched something else, that's a suffix derabanan, and we go lakula. Rebbe Lezer also says, like, I should be more specific. Rebbe Lezer says like Rebbe Meir. Rebbe Lezer was a friend of Rebbe Meir, Rebbe Lezer ben Shemua, another student of Rebbe Akiva. It's not Rebbe Lezer ben Rakam. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer lakol tamei. Rabbi Yehuda says that it's 100% tamei. It can even be metama kalim, as we're going to see. This mashkin becomes so tamei, even if it's a suffix. It's a suffix midaraisa, suffix daraisa l'chumra. If it's, you have to throw in here that it's a b'rshus hayachid, because when it comes to tuma b'rshus hayachid is what suffix tum b'rshus hayachid is tamei. We learned from Saita. Whatever the case is, it's a daraisa and it becomes tamei. Rab Yaisi v'Rab Shimon Aimerim, and this is what we're looking for. La'oichlin tameim l'kelim tayrim. When it comes to food, if it's a suffix, it makes food tamei, but it doesn't make kalim tamei. Okay, so basically what we just got is for mashkin, liquids, to make something else tamei, according to Reb Meir, it's a derabanan, therefore if it's a doubt, it's tahar. According to Reb Yaisi, to make other food tamei, it's a deraisa, and therefore if it's a doubt, it's tamei. The Gemara goes, it digresses a little bit just to discuss. We said that Reb Meir had an opinion that it's tamei. It's tamei, but it will be metama others only midirabanan, and therefore if it's a suffix, it's going to be tar. We said that Rebbe Lazar holds like him. The Gemara digresses to discuss those Rebbe Lazar really hold like him. Rebbe Lazar mashkin is l'tuma ba'olam. Rebbe Lazar holds mashkin has any tuma. But Tanya, but we have a brisa. Rebbe Lazar Oimer ein tuma lemashkin kolikar. Mashkin not only doesn't it give off tuma, it can't even become tamei. Teda, I'll prove it to you. He's going to quote an earlier source, so he has a support. You'll see. Rebbe Lazar testified this. So he said over a testimony of an earlier source. So Hayed Reb Yaisi. Oh, it says Reb Yaisi. So surprised. Sharei Hayed. I have a gears on the side. Usually, by the zugais, we never put a title onto their names. Yaisi ben Yezer, Yaisi ben Yochanan, Shmaya Vavtalian. We didn't say Shimon ben Shada. And the explanation for that was Gadol Meirab and Shmai. They're greater than any title. You don't add a title to their name. Here, there's a gears that says Rabbi Yaisi. I'm surprised. Okay. Hayed Yosef, your Yaisi ben Yezer Streda, Al Ayal Kamsa Dechain. that the this type of grasshopper is tahar. Okay, there's nothing to do with us, but we're mentioning that because that was part of this testimony. In the liquid of the Beis Mitbachaya, that's the area in the Beis Hamikdash where they shechted the karbanis, that all liquids in that area were tahar. Now, the only way that liquids could be tahar, dachar means tahar, yeah. The only way that liquids could be tahar is if the tumma on them is only midirabanan, and the rabbis didn't make a gzeira in the Beis Hamikdash. That's the possibility. Okay, now if that's the case, there's no such thing as tumma midaraisa and mashkin. Rebbe Lezer said this over as a testimony of Yosef ben Yezer, Istreda. So how could you then tell me that Rebbe Lezer holds like Reb Meir, that it becomes tameh? You just told me that it doesn't become tameh. And it's, if there is a tumah, it's only midarabanan, but the midaraisa clearly now. So the Gemara explains, Hani Chal Shmuel, we're going to have a machlekes Rav and Shmuel that's going to take us through a little bit of this daf. Hani Chal Shmuel damar dachin milatami tumasachirem abel tumasatzim yeshlam shaper. Shmuel said that what was that testimony of Yosef ben Yezer? That was only latami achirim, but it itself does become tamei. In other words, what Yosef ben Yezer says that that liquids in the Beis Mitbachaya, in the Beis Mitbachayim, in the Beis Hamikdash can't be matame anything else, but they themselves become tamei. Very good. That's exactly what Reb Meir said. El Rav damar dachin mamash. But according to Rav, that learned that the testimony was that mashkin is mamishtar. Ma'yikal meimer. What? How can you going to answer this up? What does the brisa mean that Rebbe Lazar holds like Reb Meir? Amar Rab Nachman bar Yitzchak achada. Reb Nachman Yitzchak says that in also v'chein haya Rebbe Lazar omer kidvarav. That's referring to l'tamei achirim tahar. You see, Reb Meir said two things. He said that it itself is tamei. If it's a doubt, it's because it's tumah deraisa. But to make something, if it's a doubt, if it touched something else, then it's going to be tar. Now, because it's tumah midirabanan. And also Rebbe Lazar holds like that. Which part does Rebbe Lazar hold like? That it becomes tamei, or that it's mitama something else? So Reb Nachman Yitzchak says that it's tahar to be mitama something else. And therefore, which is exactly what Rebbe Lazar holds, that it's tar to be matama something else, but it's also tar for itself. So in other words, he's only agreeing with Reb Meir on the tahar part. It's going to fit. The Gemara asks, it doesn't say it's tahar from being matama something else. In other words, it doesn't have enough tumah to give off. It can become tamei, but it can't make anything else tamei. That was Reb Meir's opinion. The only thing is that Rebbe Lazar argues with him about it itself becoming tamei. Okay. The Gemara asks, "V'kedvarav kamer denefishi." It says Rebbe Lazar omer kedvarav, like his words, not his word, not one of them, on everything he says. V'oid v'havachein ketani. It says in also Rebbe Lazar holds like him. It sounds like that he holds like him entirely. The Gemara says kasha. Okay, we're stuck over here. Gufa. The Gemara says, let's go back to what we explained. Rav Amar Dachin Mamish, Shmuel Amar Dachin Molotami Tamasacher, Mamutamat Asmi Yeshlam. We had a Machlekes Rav and Shmuel. Machlekes Rav and Shmuel regarding Mashkin. Is it Tamei itself? Or that's what Shmuel holds, it just can't give off Tamei. And Rav says that it itself is actually tar. Rav Amar Dachin Mamish, Rav says it's totally tar. Because Savitimus Mashkin derabanan, he holds that Mashkin is only becomes Tamei miderabanan. V'chigazer Rabbanan, b'Mashkin the Alma, b'Mashkin Beis Mitbachai, like Gazer. And in the Beis Hamikdash, there's no Gezerah. Perfect. Shmuel Amar Dachin Melatami Tamasachirim. Shmuel says it's only pure from making something else tamei. In other words, it's not tamei that much that it can make something else tamei. Aval tumas atzmin yesh lem. Ksavet tumas mashkin atzmin deraisa. Shmuel holds that it itself is actually tamei mideraisa. It's just it can't give off tamei. L'tamei achem derabanan. But to give off tuma, that's only rabbinic. When did the Rabbanan make a gzeira that it could give off tuma? That's only regular mashkin. But in the base of Mikdash, they didn't make that gzeira. And that gezerah that they didn't make was only not to give off tuma. But they actually do become tummy. Amalei Rav Huna Bar Chinana Lebrei. Rav Huna Bar Chinana tells his son, Ki Eilis Lakamida Rav Papa. When you go and you see Rav Papa, the later generation, Rami Lei, ask him the following question. Is it possible to say that it itself is tummy, but it can't give off tumah at all? It itself is tummy midaraisa, but it doesn't give off tumah. Kari can I have a clear pasuk that contradicts that? It says va'basar sheyiga bechol tamei, any flesh of a carbon, any flesh that touches something that's tummy lo yoichal, you can't eat it. That means that it gives off tumah. Anything that's tummy gives off tumah. Amar Rav Shisha Breder Avidi Midi Idahavi Aravia Bakodesh. What's the kashi is telling me from a pasuk? It's possible that something becomes a revi by kodesh, but if you touch a revi, there's no chamishi. So what are you telling me? That I have a pasuk that says anything that's tamei has to make the next thing tamei? It's not true. It stops at some point. So here also mashkin stops at that point. Maskef Ravashi revi bakodesh layikri tamei. A revi bakodesh is not called tamei. That's called pasel. But here the mashkin is called tamei. It says it becomes tamei. Kasha. Okay. We don't have a teretz to that question. Tashima, we're going to ask a question on Rav's opinion that says that mashkin is tar. It says v'chol mashke asher shasa yishta. You have the vowels over there. Mashke asher yishta v'chol keli yitma. In all liquid that would be drunk in any keli gives off tumah. Talking about it's in a klicheres, my yitma. Okay, so the Gemara says, you see, liquid gives off tumah. At least it becomes tummy. Becomes tummy. The Gemara says, my yitma hechsher. What does it mean, yitma? That it makes tummy? That means that it makes things tummy because it makes them susceptible to tumah. It just makes it wet. See, this is a totally different topic than everything that we're talking about. We're talking about the mashke becomes tamei, or the mashke makes, if it's tamei, it gives tumah to something else. Now you're telling me that it makes it wet, that it prepares it, makes it susceptible to tumah. It has nothing to do with our topic. The Gemara says, 1 second, hichsher me'reisha the krashamitli. You're talking about just hichsher, susceptible to tumah. That I know from a different pasuk. Mikol eichal asher yoichal. Any food that could be eaten, that water comes on it, etc. The pasuk says water comes on it, becomes tummy. The Gemara said, no, I need 2 psukim. Don't tell me that because I have another pasuk, this pasuk must be talking about real tumah. Chad betlushin v'chad b'chumbarim. One pasuk is telling me that water that's attached to the ground, and one pasuk is telling me water that's detached from the ground. No, because it can't be. It's food or vegetable. That means he took it into a keli. He took it into a cup. Or water that touched it was dipped into a maya and it dipped into water. Yeah. It's necessary. If you would only tell me water that's detached from the ground makes food susceptible, you made it something important. You took it into a keli. But water that's attached to the ground, say, it's not really water. It's part of the ground. If you'd say that water is attached to the ground only, I would say, well, that's real water because that's mamish attached to the ground. But we say if it's detached, maybe that's not really considered water. The water is detached. It's removed. So tzricha. So we need 2 psukim. Scoop it up. What are you asking? Yeah, we call that attached. Not that the water's tummy. We'll say that it's muksha, and that if I dip food into that water that's attached to the ground, that food now is susceptible to tummy. That's what the Gemara is holding. In order to resolve the question. Toshima, you have a kasha on Shmuel now. Ach, ma'ina bar mekamai miyatar. It says, but a spring and a pit and a mikveh, a collection of water will be tar. What do we see from this? See that water is tar. Shmuel says water becomes tummy. It says ma'i tar mitamase. You're not learning the right pshat in the pasuk. It's not talking about that the water is tar. It says it's talking about someone that goes in the water becomes tar, not the water. The water is a mikveh. If Tlushin mi machshirin, the Gemara asks, does water that's separated from the ground make something susceptible to tumah? Water, liquids, fluids that are in the basement b'chaya, that are in the base of Mikdash, not only are they tahar, but they can't even make anything susceptible to tumah. How is it possible for the rabbis to say that it can't make it susceptible to tumah if it's a daraisa? It must be that any liquid that's removed from the ground is only makes something susceptible midirabanan. The Gemara says tirgmal adam. We're dealing with the blood. We're not dealing with the water that's attached to the ground. We're dealing with the blood doesn't make it susceptible to tumah. How do you know that blood of sacrifices does not make susceptible to tumah? Usually blood is one of the 7 liquids that make something susceptible. Because it says regarding blood that it spilled on the floor like water. Only blood that's spilt on the floor like water makes something susceptible. But if it's not spilt on the floor like water, it doesn't make it susceptible. Which blood is not spilt on the floor like water? Blood of karbanos that needs to be collected into a vessel that needs to be sprinkled. What are you talking about? There's parts of the blood that come out of the animal called dam tamtis. It's not the original life blood that comes out. It's blood that comes out after the first spurts. And over there, that's the blood that you don't collect in the vessel. That's the blood that's not sprinkled. And nevertheless, it's not machshir. Don't bring a raya from that. That's not considered blood. Okay. Kiblamine Rav Shmuel Barami. Rav Shmuel Barami understood the explanation for this. Because the Eibishter says, Rak chazak levilti achol adam ki adam wa nefesh. But be strong, don't eat blood, because the blood has the soul. Dam sha nefesh yetzi by karidam, dam sheina nefesh yetzi by ina karidam. Which blood is considered blood? That's only the first spurts of blood that the soul goes out with. After that, the blood that drains out, it's called dam tamtis, is not considered real blood. Tashima, we have a question on Rav. Dam shenitma, it's already a question. Blood that became tameh. According to Rav, liquid doesn't become tameh. Liquid is tar. Vizarka, and you sprinkled it. If it was a b'shaygig that you sprinkled it, fine. The carbon is good. If it was b'mezid, it doesn't work. The kasha was already before. That's the Gemara says midirabanan like Rabbi Yossi ben Yezer's tereda. That's only midirabanan. It's not a kasha on Rav, because Rav said that was discussing that it's tahar. Rav said that blood is tahar. We're saying, yeah, it's tahar midiraisa. This is a din of midirabanan. This blood is only tamei midirabanan. It's tamei midiraisa. And Rabbi Yossi ben Yezer says that it's not even tamei midirabanan. It's not going with that testimony. Toshima alma tzitz meratze. What does the tzitz atone for? The plate on the kohen gadol. Al adam v'al basar v'al chelev shenitma. On these parts of the sacrifice that become tamei. It's a kasha on Rav already. Blood can't become tamei according to Rav. Bein b'sheg, bein b'mezid, bein b'inus, bein b'ratzim, bein b'yachid, bein b'tzibur. Whatever the case is, the tzitz is meratz on all of those. Gemara answers the same teretz, midirabanan like Rabbi Yossi ben Yezer's tereda. We're going like the Rabbanan. Okay, let's leave it over there. It's only aser midirabanan. It's only tamei midirabanan, and it's not a kasha on Rav, because Rav was also held that it's tahar midiraisa, and here it's also tahar midiraisa. It's just that it's tamei midirabanan.